Another example we can look to is right before Jesus was arrested, leading to his crucifixion. In the moments leading to Jesus' arrest, he was in a garden praying with his disciples. As he was approached by the soldiers preparing to take him into their custody, one of Jesus' disciples took out his sword and cut off the ear of someone who had come to arrest him. It would be understandable if Jesus shrugged and said, "I know what you guys are about to do to me. Getting off with a little disembodied ear is lenient." That's not quite the direction it went. Instead, Jesus rebuked his disciple for the violence and healed the individual's severed ear. If you continue on with the story, Jesus was victim to much more violence and never fought back. I don't think that Jesus is saying if someone wants to beat you up or kill you, then you're out of alignment with his teachings if you don't go along with it. I think the conclusion to draw is that don't meet evil acts with other evil acts. Just because someone is doing something awful to you doesn't give you license to respond in kind. A horrible thing happened to Charlie. Doing something horrible to someone else won't undo that. And as someone who never condoned violence, he wouldn't want that either. The next point I want to address is how Charlie continues to be mocked and his words taken out of context. I think there's a large misconception that giving your life to Jesus and following his teachings is going to make your life easy. This isn't the case. Aspects of your life will improve, but it doesn't necessarily get easier. There are several examples of scripture that I can point to that discuss how people who follow Christ will be persecuted, but I'll just give one example that's found in John, another gospel of the New Testament. Jesus says, "If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you." He goes on to say, "Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you." I'm not saying that everything Charlie did and said was persecuted because he was a Christian, nor was he always acting in alignment with Jesus' teachings. I think the vast majority of what people didn't like about him were his opinions on politics. Only some of those opinions are because of his faith. I am also not saying that Republicans are Jesus' political party. There's a huge gap between the policies of the Republicans and the Democrats for that matter, and how Jesus tells us to live our lives. What I am saying is that Charlie knew that speaking up about his faith would invite harsh opinions towards him. Knowing this doesn't make it any easier to listen to people quote him out of context or take the least charitable view possible of what he is saying. Knowing that does, however, make it less surprising as it continues to happen. Like I touched on earlier in this episode, I never sought out Charlie Kirk's content. I would see clips here and there and knew he was a divisive political person. There were a lot of quotes I saw attributed to him that when I saw them, my heart sank. They would be characterized as racist, misogynistic, bigoted, basically the worst things a person could say. They often would clip him saying something at a debate or in an interview. Sometimes after watching a clip, I'd realize that the author of the post or article didn't even watch the video that they were posting. The quote they claimed Charlie said was nowhere in the video. He didn't say what he was being accused of saying. Other times, the quote from the clip was something he said that could be interpreted as racist, sexist, or bigoted. I think it's a major flaw in our media, major news outlets, and social media alike, that only the most shocking rhetoric will capture the wider general audience. In practicing that delivery method, there is a giant risk. If you say something shocking without the rest of the context, you're at the risk of people reframing what you're saying with the worst of intentions. I'm not a staunch Charlie Kirk apologist. I'm not going to go through and talk about the most egregious claims against Charlie, say what the claim is, and then refute the claim. There are too many. However, I will encourage you to do what I did. Find one vile quote that's attributed to Charlie Kirk. It won't be hard. When you find one, seek out the full interview or debate where he allegedly said those words. Then find out where specifically in that interview or conversation he said it. Look at what question he was asked, then listen to his full response. Not a shortened version of the exchange, the full conversation. Maybe you still disagree with what he is saying, but did he say, with the same intention as what was ascribed to him, what people claimed he said. It takes a little extra effort to do it this way, but doing it this way reduces the risk of your opinion being colored by someone else's. You might confirm what you already know to be true about him, or you might be surprised at how what was quoted is completely different than what he was saying. Either way, if you've only ever heard what Charlie has said from someone else, I hope you take my advice and see for yourself what he said. The last reaction to Charlie's assassination I want to talk about is people concluding that the time for conversation is over. I can confidently and emphatically say that this is the exact opposite of what Charlie Kirk would want the outcome of his death to be. For people to say that it's pointless to continue talking with the other side, you're essentially saying that Charlie Kirk dedicated his life to something that was pointless. It isn't true. Ideological conversations need to happen. It's when the temperatures are the hottest is when we need people talking to one another, actually talking and listening like Charlie did, not just spewing your own talking points and shouting over the person when they try to engage with your ideas. He dedicated his life to the idea that conversations can change hearts and minds. The last thing he would want is for people to stop having these conversations, because if you remember, one of the reasons why he started doing this was because when people stop talking, that's when violence happens. Tying this idea back to his faith, despite what a lot of people believe, Jesus didn't hang out with exclusively holy people, the people who shared his opinions, or shared his definition of righteousness. He was pretty much the exact opposite of that. Jesus kept company with the socially outcasted, the diseased, the sexually immoral, the corrupt tax collectors, who, believe it or not, were probably more hated in Jesus' time than in our own. Many of Jesus' own disciples were fishermen, which was not a highly esteemed occupation. Jesus so much so surrounded himself with the fringe of society that one time he was at a tax collector's house with many other tax collectors, and the Pharisees came and confronted him. If you don't know what a Pharisee is, they were basically the keepers of Jewish law. They were a group of self-righteous people, many of whom who were corrupt, and believed it was their job to tell people around them that they were unclean and they were in bad standing with God. The Pharisees clashed and tried to find fault constantly with Jesus. So on this occasion, they were asking Jesus, why does he keep company with tax collectors and sinners? To which Jesus responded, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. Jesus constantly engaged in dialogue with not just the ones who loved him, but also the ones who despised him and had murderous intent for him. When I was younger, I always thought Jesus was having these conversations in an adversarial way. It's my belief now that he wasn't. Every interaction, every conversation was an opportunity for the Pharisees to see that they were off course. They loved the law. They didn't love God. Jesus time and time again interacted with them, not because they were virtuous in their own eyes, but because they were sinners. So no, I do not believe that we should stop talking to one another, that one side is so far gone and lost that words can't reach them any longer. We need to have conversations with views and opinions that are different than our own. If not, you risk ending up radicalized to the point that you have dehumanized anyone who doesn't agree with you. You think it's okay if someone goes and kills someone who thinks differently than you. And I'm under no illusion that this is a disease that only infects one side of the political spectrum. This is a human issue of extremism. There are absolutely just as many people on the right who would celebrate if something happened to someone on the left that they have been conditioned by social media algorithms to hate. No side is morally superior to the other, but it's this belief that allows people to dehumanize the other side and treat them as less than. I do not believe that Republicans or Democrats are the arbiters of what's right and good. No side has figured it out. That's why America is split 50-50. It's completely arrogant to believe that your side knows all the answers. They don't. I confidently say this because there have been times in American history where one party has had unilateral control over all the branches of government. Do all the problems of society get fixed? Absolutely not. Eventually, the pendulum swings the other way, and the other side of the political spectrum have their shot at being the majority in all branches of government. The result? There are still just as many problems before they got into power as after. No one has all the answers. We need to have the conversations, disagreements, and compromises, because that is when the best idea has a chance to emerge. You can see the destruction on social media when people surround themselves with only people who think like them. It's a human trait to want to be in a company of people who share similar interests as you. However, it's in these environments people have a tendency to outsource their critical thinking and let other people think for them. I don't believe it's always malicious. I don't even think it's something that happens consciously. So the only way to make sure your voice gets heard is to be the loudest and/or to have the most extreme views. That cycle happens over and over until a once unfathomable idea, like killing someone who disagrees with you, becomes the norm. There is no diversity of ideas. People don't want to push back and risk being ostracized from their group, so they go along with it, resulting in a homogeneous groupthink that is detrimental to the proliferation of new ideas. You can see it time and time again with the far left and far right. I believe the overwhelming, vast majority don't agree with either of them, but people are afraid to speak out and risk having that violent ire be directed at them. I know that's a concern of mine. This conversation wasn't one that I wanted to insert myself into. It's one of the reasons why there's such a gap between Charlie Kirk's assassination and this episode. I never wanted to release an episode wading into the muck of politics. I don't think it's politics that will save us from our nature, but it can't always be someone else who speaks up. Sometimes you have to use your own voice, because the people who are speaking for you are only speaking at you. We can't allow the people who believe that speech is violence to be the only ones who get to express their ideas. We can't give up the reality that the only way to combat bad ideas is to propose better ideas. We can't give up on the reality that civil discourse is the remedy to our disagreements, because if we do, then what's left?